From the School of Life Foundation, this is another episode of What You Giving, a broadcast based on the invitation, find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world. This becomes your gift. Everyone has something inside of themselves to give, and I want to know, what are you giving? In my interviews, we meet people from all walks of life. I am Jack Rolfe, and on the show today, we have Mark Blackham. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, you are welcome, and really appreciate you taking some time. I'm excited for this episode today and look forward to having some discussion with you. And so I always kind of like to jump into things and just ask to have you tell our listeners a little bit about your family.
Well, I have a small family. My children are adults now. They have their own families. Couple children. I have a daughter and a son, and they each have their own families. And I really enjoy the grandkids and spending time with them along with my adult children and their spouses. So it's pretty nice. My wife is a teacher. I work in IT, kind of for a profession, but enjoy service and giving and all that goes along with that.
Boy, I know that part about you, and we'll get into that here a little bit as we get into the show. But you mentioned IT as a career, but I know it's a little beyond that. In fact, from what I've known of you over the years, you are kind of a intelligent, brilliant man. And share with us a little bit more about your career and what you've done and what you're doing.
Well, out of college, I graduated with an accounting degree, worked as a CPA for several years, and worked for companies that I ended up having some kind of issues with. So I was in a situation where I was in kind of a bad situation, emotionally, I guess I would say, based on that. And I had a college friend of mine that came through, was doing a training course on IT. He and I worked in college together, and he said, "Hey, Mark, this really pains me to see you in this situation. You would be really good at what I do. How about it?" And, just one of those dear friends. We kind of talked, and it was I knew it would be a very time-consuming transition to change careers. And he was willing to help me, and even financially, to support my family for the period of time that it would take to transition. And that's a pretty impressive friend. Unfortunately, I didn't need the financial help, but he definitely helped me, for the training and those types of things, to where, I started my own business and was doing consulting and training, and then ended up, working for companies, and that's where I'm at now, working for a healthcare company and taking care of their IT infrastructure work. So
I appreciate you sharing that. It kind of makes me think, as you're talking there, Mark, that quite often in life, this path, this journey that we're all on in the school of life, we have doors that close on us. Sometimes they close slowly, and sometimes they close quite abruptly.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that, and I know this is cliche, but I don't know if we really think about it. When one door closes, there's another door opening for us. And quite often, that door is even a better and bigger opportunity. And it sounds like that's what you experienced. Is that correct?
It's a different door. It has, what I found is that I can go to work and not feel, really bad about what I'm doing or asked to do, or having to go against my principles, or being asked to go against my principles, let's say. And so I can go to work and feel good about what I'm doing. And I think that's the difference that I found. And that's nice, be able to kind of look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and say, I'm going to go do something good, kind of thing. So
Yeah, that really does make a difference. And I've never heard anybody describe it that way before. It's a different door. And I love that. Absolutely love that. And so I know you are doing good things with work and with your family, but you do a lot of good things throughout the community that you live in and throughout the world. And I'm going to kind of tee up the next part of our discussion here with 3 words, and I'm going to ask you to describe these about yourself, but 3 words tied to Mark Blackham. And the first one is homemade bread. The second one is flower pens, and the third is Honduras. And now the listeners are probably thinking that's an interesting tie of 3 words there. But let's start with homemade bread. What does that mean in the life of Mark Blackham and as far as serving?
I would say it's probably homemade bread. I'd twist that a little bit to say cinnamon rolls.
Cinnamon rolls. Yes, even better.
Yes. The gooey goodness is what I call it. And I just take time, typically on the weekends when I have a little bit more time to do this, but to kind of overnight make some cinnamon rolls and bake them in the morning, kind of thing, and try and give those to family, obviously, but also people around me that I can give those to, and whoever I feel could use them. And it's always an interesting reaction that you get when you take, a tray full of cinnamon rolls over to somebody, and just you make their day, just to let them know that somebody's thinking about them. And
I know that would make my day any day. And it's interesting, this gooey goodness, as you describe it. I love that as well. As you deliver this to people, and I know this isn't the reason you're doing it just to spread goodness, but do you find that at times, opens up, a friendship, or opens up getting to know these individuals even more?
Yeah, well, I think, trying to do that now is, particularly with COVID, you kind of had to be careful and take people's concerns into account and those types of things, and making sure that they were okay with that.
Right.
And it kind of paused for a little while. But the other thing that we found is that we're here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in this area there was kind of, and I'm sure other areas had a same or a similar type of experience, where there's kind of this reshuffling of people. And so in your sphere of influence, whether it's church or community organizations or work, you saw a lot of people come in and out. And so there's a lot of people that I didn't know very well. And it's like, okay, let's go take them, let's use the gooey goodness as an introduction.
I love it.
And so it's a good way to meet people and introduce yourself. And, sweetness always enhances relationships.
Yes, it does. And I strongly believe that the more we open ourselves up, we bring others into our lives, it just enriches our lives. Yeah. And gives us an opportunity, through that, to maybe even spread more goodness in different ways. And so that's fun, number 1. Let's jump to number 2 here. Flowered pens. Share with us what that means in the world of Mark Blackham.
Well, it kind of goes back to my first high school job. I worked for a neighbor who had a florist shop, and one night he came and delivered some flowers to my mom, and he's the owner of the florist shop, and he delivered the flowers to my mom. And she was like, hey, Mark, you should go talk to Bob about, see if he needs anybody to deliver flowers for him. If he's delivering flowers, maybe he needs somebody, go talk to him. And so I went and talked to him, and led to working for him. And just every time I would go to work, I would open the door into the florist shop to enter into to go to work. And, the whole store just smells awesome.
Yes.
And, just the memories of thinking of those sensations and the flowers, and they're, beautiful, just kind of brings back a lot of emotions. But, and so flowers are just something that I think in people in general can appreciate, right?
Yes.
So it was a great job. You would, knock, ring the doorbell, they would answer the door, they would get this huge smile on their face, and you'd hand them the flowers. And, it's just an awesome job, and just something I had this connection with flowers over my life. And so I was out west at one of the kind of Mexican-y type restaurants out there, and they had, by the cash register, they had some flower pens. And I was like, that's really a cool thing. And I appreciate that. So I thought, well, I could probably do that. I can buy the flowers at, the hobby store or whatever, and use the floral tape, kind of like what I would do, some of the stuff that I would do at the florist shop. And I can make these pens, and I can do something with them. It's kind of what I thought. And so I thought about it, and I said, there should be a message that goes with these, something that people will remember if I give them a pen to make them happy, also have a message that goes with it. And so one of the message I came up with was that God made flowers for us to be happy, but, and I'm kind of abbreviating a little bit, God made flowers for us to be happy. And so when we see them, we get an emotional response, and it's usually tied to love and care and those types of things. But God's message was that his most beautiful creation were his children. And so whenever you see this flower pen, when I give it to somebody, I was like, remember that you're God's greatest creation. And so, they can link that when I see the flower pen. I don't have one with me. I guess I do. Whenever you see your flower pen,
Yes.
remember that you're God's greatest creation. And so that's kind of where that went. And just a quick kind of story about that. We have time to.
You betcha.
An interesting story.
Yes.
And when you give something out or serve somebody, you don't expect necessarily anything back, right?
Right.
And so this was several years ago on Thanksgiving. My daughter and I were just kind of walking around the neighborhood, and a road that goes along our street is kind of a major thoroughfare, and there was some damage on the shoulder of the road. And while we were walking, we heard kind of a bang, and then this car comes in with a flat tire into our neighborhood. And so we walk up, and I asked the girls had gotten out of their car. I asked them, do you need help changing the tire? And they're like, no. And so I was kind of, it's kind of abrupt.
Yeah.
We kept going on our walk, and the walk kind of comes back where they were. And the Spirit was like, Mark, ask him again. And I was like, I'm sitting here arguing with the Spirit, saying, well, I already asked them. They said they were very abrupt. They were very sure that they didn't want any help. Spirit's like, ask him again, Mark. I was like, okay, I'll ask him again. And so this time they were like, oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you very much. Because, having gone through the trunk and trying to figure out what they were going to do, they didn't, they obviously didn't know what they were doing.
Yes.
So somebody coming up and actually asking them again. Um, they let me do it. So we were talking, and Thanksgiving, they were on their way to someplace. I was like, oh, that kind of stinks that you're probably going to be late now. So just kind of had that kind of a discussion while I'm changing the tire. And I said, I have something back at home. Do you mind swinging by my house, which was a couple of blocks away? Do you mind swinging by my house? I'll meet you over there. I'll walk over there. And so my daughter had kind of gone ahead, and she came out with some flower pens.
Nice.
And while I was changing the tire, the spirit's like, Mark, ask them if they will come and get some flower pens for me. Don't really tell them what it's about. So I told them, I said, here, I have these. I actually have more than one. Here's a whole, handful of them. You will know who to give these to. And if you would give these to people with this message, you'll have a really cool experience. And they're like, yeah, we'll do that. So I told them the story. My daughter and I went back in the house. The car didn't leave for quite a while. I was kind of like, is everything okay with their car? But it finally left. And then a couple of months later, so that was November. In March, 4 or 5 months later, I got a telephone call from some sister missionaries that I had given flower pens. They knew this little stick that I have. And they're like, can we come over to your house? We have something to tell you. I was like, well, it's kind of late. And they're like, no, it's really important. So they came in, and they're like showing me their flower pens. And it was these two girls that I had given these flowers to that they had come in contact with. They told them the story and given the flower pens.
Wow.
And so I asked the sisters, I was like, so what did they tell you about this? And they said, well, there's this really nice man that gave us these pens, but that's not the whole story. He changed our tire and on Thanksgiving, and when he gave us these flower pens, we didn't leave his house for a while. We were sobbing. We didn't know that there were kind people in the world that would just do something nice. So it was a cool experience.
Yeah.
You never expect anything like that to kind of come full circle. You don't ever expect them to hear anything back from those flower pens or something like that. It's just that, I think that was kind of a tender mercy kind of thing when those happen.
Mark, that first of all was a great explanation of flower pens in your life, but a beautiful story, and obviously very tender story to you, and rightfully so. And when on this show, when we talk about needs in the world, one need in the world is for more kindness.
Yeah.
And that act of kindness that touched them then started rippling forwards and spreading additional kindness, which is wonderful. And there's a few other things as you were talking that I was thinking about, and one, I was going back to flowers and your description of flowers, and they do bring beauty and fragrance to the world, just like kindness does. And we hear the phrase often, stop and smell the roses, which is alluding to slowing down a little bit. But I believe we literally do need to stop and smell the roses or whatever other flowers that exude a fragrance, because it just is cleansing in your life. And so I know that experience when you first started with that flower shop, how positive that was and could be. And then you talked a little bit as you got into the story of you described as the spirit whispering to you. We talk on the show and about our soul speaking to us, and And, but the key thing is, as we're going about life, is to not only listen, but then have the courage to act upon what we're hearing, which you did. It took you a minute, and it takes all of us a minute. Sometimes we don't act on it, sometimes we do, and I'm hoping for everyone to always act on those times, because in your example, it might seem simple in some eyes of spreading that kindness, but I portray here that it's beyond simple, because kindness in and of itself can change the world. And even if you're changing the world for one person or two people in that instance, you're changing the world for all of us, because as we quickly found out there, it spreads. And I was able to bring up the flowered pens to ask Mark, because several years ago I was a recipient of one of those pens from Mark, and I still have it, and I still cherish it. And you sharing the story today stirred up those tender emotions in me, as well, as you shared that with me. And as I have it on my dresser drawers, and every time I walk by there, I'm able to see it and remember it, and remember who I am, but also remember who gave it to me. And so I really appreciate that. And so, Mark, I think that's a good springboard into the third item I put out there, Honduras. I know you've had some service there, and even I think in other countries. Tell us a little bit about spreading your goodness around the world.
Well, so some of my jobs took me to various parts of the world. In addition to that, I did a full-time mission for Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the early 80s in southern Argentina, which kind of, gave me a bug for exploring and adventures and those types of things. Having experienced another culture in depthly. So I looked for jobs that would allow me to work in other countries. And so I worked in the Middle East, Africa, Central and South America, and talked a little bit about, some of the things that I saw that, gave me pause or didn't necessarily agree with me. And part of it was the amount of that the companies that I worked for gave back to the countries where they operated. And I thought that, obviously the people that were employed by them benefited, but, did it go beyond that very much? And I was always kind of bothered by that. And I just had some of these things in the back of my mind that I felt like I needed to give back. Maybe there was something that I could do. And so I just kind of thought about it. How could I do things? And in July of 2010, I was at work, and I just was passing through the break room, and there was a newspaper on the counter. And I paused for a minute. Regardless, whatever I was doing, I paused for a minute, and I picked up the paper, and I read a newspaper article. It had a little photo on it, and it was about a gentleman that started an organization here in Cincinnati that uses solar power as a ministry. And the newspaper interview was about him going to Honduras and putting solar power in schools in the countryside that don't have power, and how it transforms these communities and schools by allowing them to have light in the evening that they didn't have before, and then the schools to be able to use computers and TVs and DVDs to provide additional materials for the students. And so just again, kind of that spirit that we talked about before spoke to me and said, this is something that you can do. And I was like, well, yeah, I like solar power. I think that's a great invention that we have. And I don't do it. I'm interested in it. That's something I'd like to learn more about. And I definitely want to give back to places like Honduras where I'd worked, and felt that they had additional need and it's something that I could do. And so I felt very prompted to call this guy, had this telephone number in the article. And so I called Alan and said, hey, I read the newspaper article. Would you be interested in a volunteer? And he's like, yeah, that's great. You know, here's what you need to do if you want to do that. So one of them was training. So they were having a training the next month. So I signed up for the training. And then a few months later, they were going to have a mission trip, a week-long mission trip to Honduras to install solar powers in these schools. So I signed up for that as well. And kind of an interesting personal side story to that. The week before I was going to go, my son found a tumor. And so we took him to the doctor, and it ended up being cancer. And so the day before I was supposed to leave, my son had an operation to remove this cancer. And so I was planning on, canceling the trip and so forth. And so, I mean, my son was literally on the recovery table and he's like, Dad, you're going to go on your trip, aren't you? And I was like, no, I'm planning on staying home with you. And he's like, no, Dad. Those kids are waiting for you. You're going to go. Mom will take care of me. I'll be fine. So there was kind of a family sacrifice, if you will. Have Dad go away, go do this while, son's recovering from his operation. So that was very touching because 2 years before that, as a family, we had gone to Guatemala for a family vacation. Guatemala is one of my favorite places on earth. So I took my family there to experience it, and we volunteered at an orphanage. And so my son had seen the poverty and the types of things like that. And so, that was very touching that he would want me to go and serve. And so it was kind of hard knowing that he was at home kind of recovering from a surgery while I'm, a few thousand miles away. But it was also added to that, right? To the experience that I had that,
yes,
my family in a very selfless way wanted me to go do this. And that's not the only time that we've had, family issues like that, where people are like, no, you need to go do this. This is more important than what our family, is going through. So having gone on that, and what's unique about Sunlight Power, that's the name of the organization that I was with, that not only do they take, missionaries from the US, but they also partner with schools, churches, universities, and take local volunteers that also go with us out to these rural communities to install the solar power. So it's, we're educating these people in these small villages about solar power. They're training people in universities. They're taking volunteers from churches, local churches down there. And so it's this kind of mix of, Hondurans and North Americans that are going forward and making these a very interesting transformation of these communities. Not on this first trip, but on other trips, we've actually been interviewed by kind of a regional TV station. And while we're being interviewed on the TV, people would call in that of communities, surrounding communities, or the communities where we actually did serve, put the solar powers in. And the people where we did the solar powers were like, yeah, this is awesome. Thank you for doing this. And then the other communities are like, hey, we would like this as well. Can you guys come back? And so, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so, it's very powerful to see that, that what you're doing, there is a need. The people appreciate it, calling in saying, thank you so much for coming. You've come a long ways, either from, the capital all the way out to this, middle of nowhere kind of place. And all these people that have taken their time to, travel all the way down here, provide, all this equipment, et cetera, as well as the time and effort to put it in and train us on it. So it's really been an interesting situation, and a growing experience, but also really seeing the difference that it makes. Procter and Gamble actually gave a grant to Sunlight Power a few years ago, and we used that to put solar power in the southern Mexican state of Chiapas. And this is, where the indigenous people live, and where some of the political upheavals that have happened previously, Zapatista type things. And so we partnered with an organization there that worked with these Mayan villages that kind of go out and help them out. We brought those people into kind of a county seat. We had the Celtal interpreters, Spanish to English interpreters. So we had the Mayan people that were speaking, translate that into Spanish and that into English, and then English to Spanish to Celtal and back. And seeing these people learn about solar panels and inverters and all the different components that go into it, it was one of the coolest cultural experiences that I've had as well.
Yes, gosh, Mark, what a beautiful impact you and your family have been having on the world in those things you've described. And I loved you sharing the support that you've had from your family. I want to point out there that comes because you've set a wonderful example for them. And my hope is that parents throughout the world will be more and more a good example to their children, and grandparents to their grandchildren. And those examples we set can be very powerful and cause, again, this ripple effect to move forward. And, I want to point out to the listeners too, as Mark's been talking here on this third item we had described, again, he referenced times in his life where he felt impressions, which we describe on the show as your soul speaking to you. And he had the courage to act upon those things. And by doing so, it led him to be able to use his skills and talents to bless the lives of other people, which ultimately blesses all of us. And, there's this process, Mark, that we go through in life. And I think we often don't realize we're going through it. I describe it as a process of discovering, developing, and delivering. And the discovering part of it is discovering our talents and skills. The developing part of it is developing those talents and skills into things that we're passionate about, the things that bring us purpose in life, and then delivering those talents and skills, which is our gift. And that's our gift to the world. And you've been doing that in many ways, and all throughout this process. The key again is listening to those promptings that we have in our life, and then having the courage to act upon them, and then act upon them, and it just keeps moving us to different steps. And it happens all throughout our life if we'll do it from early age to later age. And so with that, I want to ask you another question here, Mark. That the tagline of the show is "Find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world." And we've been hearing that from you in bits and pieces as we go. But when I say that, find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world, how do you define that? How do you describe that?
I think as you go through life, you're given a couple of things. One is opportunities. And, as you realize what those opportunities are and act on those, like you're talking about, I think those are some of the things that bring us, the development and kind of that intrinsic part of growth and achievement, right?
Yes.
But as you're going through life, I think the part that is most rewarding to me, that I value the most, is the interactions and the people that are put in my path. And I think that's the gift. And I'm always, I feel very grateful for that gift, and the people that I meet, and those relationships that I'm able to have with those people. I think about the people, with the flower pens, or, through Sunlight Power, or work, or church, or, neighbors, all those kind of things. That's what makes life bountiful and joyful. You have your family, and that's probably the greatest gift. But having that interaction with other people, I think is very beautiful, and makes life flourish on a personal sense.
Yeah, that is great. I love that, Mark. And opportunities lead to associations.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start using that. I just love that. Opportunities lead to associations, which ultimately are the things that bless our life. And this has been a wonderful discussion. I could talk all day with you, Mark, and but at some point we have to bring things to a close. And I like to close the show with my guests each week with our final question, and it has to do with a golden nugget, which we hear that term, and so this is your opportunity. If there's anything you want the listeners to remember most today, whether it's something we've talked about or something we haven't even talked about, what's the one thing, Mark, that you want individuals to learn from your interview today?
Well, I would have to say that don't expect, or I guess what I found in my life is that finding opportunities don't come every day, and they're not easy to identify. But on the ones that, and so talk to other people about things that you see and opportunities that you find, and find people that you can confide in, whether it's parents or really good friends, or spouse or family, whatever, that will give you an honest answer that won't sugarcoat it or try and manipulate you. And by following through on those, that's what makes life interesting and an adventure.
Well, there is a golden nugget for sure. Some wonderful advice, and I hope everyone follows that. Mark, it's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to remind those listening to the show that your heart feels for you, your mind reasons for you, but your soul speaks to you. Are you listening? Did you listen today? If so, what did you hear and what did you learn? Will you now have the courage to act upon what you felt? Thank you for tuning in. Please follow us on your podcast app so that each new episode is always downloaded, ready for you to listen in. And then share the link with others. We would love to have you leave a review, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to send us a message or desire to be on the show, you can send an email to whatyougiven@gmail.com. A special thanks goes to our producers, Ben and Kayla Martin. Now it is time to move upward and onward and ask yourself, what you given?